and then they croak. They don't even get to eat." And with that, she stuck her hand into the foamy layer of bugs and cleared her initials, CL. We've tried to arrange the photographs chronologically, though the passage of so many years has made it difficult. A few are fuzzy, but revealing nonetheless. Exhibit number 1 shows the Lisbon house shortly before Cecilia's suicide attempt. It was taken by a real estate agent, Ms. Carmina D'Angelo, whom Mr. Lisbon had hired to sell the house his large family had long outgrown. As the snapshot shows, the slate roof had not yet begun to shed its shingles. The porch was still visible above the bushes, and the windows were not yet held together with strips of masking tape. A comfortable suburban home. The upper right second-story window contains a blur that Mrs. Lisbon identified as Mary Lisbon. "She used to tease her hair because she thought it was limp," she said years later, recalling how her daughter had looked for her brief time on Earth. In the photograph, Mary is caught in the act of blow-drying her hair. Her head appears to be on fire, but that is only a trick of the light. It was June 13th, 83 degrees out, under sunny skies. When the paramedics were satisfied they had reduced the bleeding to a trickle, they put Cecilia on a stretcher and carried her out of the house to the truck in the driveway. She looked like a tiny Cleopatra on an imperial litter. We saw the gangly paramedic with the Wyatt Earp mustache come out first, the one we'd call Sheriff when we got to know him better through these domestic tragedies. And then the fat one appeared, carrying the back end of the stretcher and stepping daintily across the lawn, peering at his police-issue shoes as though looking out for dog shit. Though later, when we were better acquainted with the machinery, we knew he was checking the blood pressure gauge. Sweating and fumbling, they moved toward the shuddering, blinking truck. The fat one tripped on a lone croquet wicket. In revenge, he kicked it. The wicket sprang loose, plucking up a spray of dirt, and fell with a ping on the driveway. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lisbon burst onto the porch, trailing Cecilia's flannel nightgown, and let out a long wail that stopped time. Under the molting trees and above the blazing, overexposed grass, those 4 figures passed in tableau. The 2 slaves offering the victim to the altar, lifting the stretcher into the truck. The priestess brandishing the torch, waving the flannel nightgown. And the drugged virgin rising up on her elbows with an otherworldly smile on her pale lips. Mrs. Lisbon rode in the back of the EMS truck, but Mr. Lisbon followed in the station wagon, observing the speed limit. 2 of the Lisbon daughters were away from home, Therese in Pittsburgh at a science convention, and Bonnie at music camp, trying to learn the flute after giving up the piano. Her hands were too small. The violin, her chin hurt. The guitar, her fingertips bled. And the trumpet, her upper lip swelled. Mary and Lux, hearing the siren, had run home from their voice lesson across the street with Mr. Jessup. Barging into that crowded bathroom, they registered the same shock as their parents at the sight of Cecilia with her spattered forearms and pagan nudity. Outside, they hugged on a patch of uncut grass that Butch, the brawny boy who mowed it on Saturdays, had missed. Across the street, a truck full of men from the Parks Department attended to some of our dying elms. The EMS siren shrieked, going away, and the botanist and his crew withdrew their insecticide pumps to watch the truck. When it was gone, they began spraying again. The stately elm tree, also visible in the foreground of Exhibit Number 1, has since succumbed to the fungus spread by Dutch elm beetles and has been cut down. The paramedics took Cecilia to Bon Secours Hospital on Kercheval and Maumee. In the emergency room, Cecilia watched the attempt to save her life with an eerie detachment. Her yellow eyes didn't blink, nor did she flinch when they stuck a needle in her arm. Dr. Armandson stitched up her wrist wounds. Within 5 minutes of the transfusion, he declared her out of danger. Chucking her under her chin, he said, "What are you doing here, honey? You're not even old enough to know how bad life gets." And it was then Cecilia gave orally what was to be her only form of suicide note, and a useless one at that, because she was going to live. "Obviously, doctor," she said, "you've never been a 13-year-old girl." The Lisbon girls were 13, Cecilia, and 14, Lux, and 15, Bonnie, and 16, Mary, and 17, Therese. They were short, round-buttocked in denim, with roundish cheeks that recalled that same dorsal softness. Whenever we got a glimpse, their faces looked indecently revealed, as though we were used to seeing women in veils. No one could understand how Mr. and Mrs. Lisbon had produced such beautiful children. Mr. Lisbon taught high school math. He was thin, boyish, stunned by his own gray hair. He had a high voice, and when Joe Larson told us how Mr. Lisbon had cried when Lux was later rushed to the hospital during her own suicide scare, we could easily imagine the sound of his girlish weeping. Whenever we saw Mrs. Lisbon, we looked in vain for some sign of the beauty that must have once been hers. But the plump arms, the brutally cut steel-wool hair, and the librarian's glasses foiled us every time. We saw her only rarely, in the morning, fully dressed, though the sun hadn't come up, stepping out to snatch up the dewy milk cartons, or on Sundays, when the family drove in their paneled station wagon to St. Paul's Catholic Church on the lake. On those mornings, Mrs. Lisbon assumed a queenly iciness. Clutching her good purse, she checked each daughter for signs of makeup before allowing her to get in the car, and it was not unusual for her to send Lux back inside to put on a less revealing top. None of us went to church, so we had a lot of time to watch them. The two parents, leached of color, like photographic negatives, and then the 5 glittering daughters in their homemade dresses, all lace and ruffle, bursting with their fructifying flesh. Only one boy had ever been allowed in the house. Peter Sisson had helped Mr. Lisbon install a working model of the solar system in his classroom at school, and in return, Mr. Lisbon had invited him for dinner. He told us the girls had kicked him continually under the table, from every direction, so that he couldn't tell who was doing it. They gazed at him with their blue, febrile eyes and smiled, showing their crowded teeth, the only feature of the Lisbon girls we could ever find fault with. Bonnie was the only one who didn't give Peter Sisson a secret look or kick. She only said grace and ate her food silently, lost in the piety of a 15-year-old. After the meal, Peter Sisson asked to go to the bathroom, and because Therese and Mary were both in the downstairs one, giggling and whispering, he had to use the girls upstairs. He came back to us with stories of bedrooms filled with crumpled panties, of stuffed animals hugged to death by the passion of the girls, of a crucifix draped with a brazier, of gauzy chambers of canopied beds, and of the effluvia of so many young girls becoming women together in the same cramped space.